Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back. It's so lovely to see you all. Everyone have a lovely day? Excellent. Listings being taken left and right, I am certain. That's what we're talking about. So might as well go out and do it. Ooh, baby. All right, so we got through, if I am not mistaken, our anatomy of a seller transaction all the way up until number 26, I think, yesterday, before we popped Karen on for you. And so I wanted to just open it up to any questions that you might have had on the first couple of pages of the anatomy of the seller transaction, or anything that Karen might have brought to the table, anything I can assist with in any of that. Questions, concerns, queries, excitements? Nope. All righty. So then let's keep moving forward. So we are in the anatomy of a seller transaction material. And we can keep pushing through that to get to the end of that. And then I will ask any questions that you might have on the seller side of the business from any piece that we've covered or any piece we haven't covered. And then we will pivot over into buyers for the rest of our time today. You should have received the buyer consult scripts via email earlier today. So if you didn't see those, check your email because they are there if you want to be following along. All right, so the anatomy of a seller transaction continues now on page 3, number 27. And so we had just had the conversation around, at some point in the transaction, you get to a point where everything kind of seems to be going, and there's not a ton to do, right? And so what we had said was the most important part of that period of time is to stay in communication with as many people as are in the transaction. So what that means is make sure that you're having a conversation every 48 to 72 hours with your seller client, right? That might sound like a lot. I'm going to tell you, every 2 to 3 days to have a conversation, even if it's just to say, hey, Tony, it's Rick Scott. Just wanted to check in, make sure everything's going okay. Any questions you have? Anything that you've heard from the attorney that I should know about? Anything that's come up with the house you're purchasing down in Atlanta, right? Just conversation, just checking in, seeing how things are going. How's the packing going? All that kind of stuff. And then, of course, keeping in communication, excuse me, with the agent representing the buyer to make sure everything's going okay on the buyer side of things as well. And a call to the seller's attorney every once in a while, just checking in and making sure everything's hunky-dory might not be a bad thing either. So that brings us right up to number 27. So 27, keep the MCA in your office in the loop as to any changes in dates, right? Anything that's different from what you submitted. Remember, you submitted all your documentation within 3 days of 3 days of selling the listing. So now it's, I don't know, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, maybe. Stuff may be changed. Maybe the closing date got moved up, it got pushed, right? You have to keep the brokerage in the loop on all of that so that we know what's going on. What the important part of that is we invoice the transaction for your commission, right? And if we don't know that a date has changed, we maybe are invoicing too late, right? If you have a closing date that's now moved up, typically invoices go out about 2 to 3 weeks, anyway, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the time of on the time of year and time of month that we're talking about. So 2 to 4 weeks beforehand, if all of a sudden your closing date has been moved up and we're in that 2-week period of time and no invoice has gone out, then everyone's all concerned and making phone calls. So again, just keep everybody in the loop when things change, so that we can stay on top of that with you and make sure that things go out in a timely fashion. Number 28, once a closing date's been settled on, mark your calendars for about a week or so prior, because you're going to want to start to ramp up communication with everybody. Again, you've been, certainly with your own seller client, you've been talking every 2 to 3 days. Now you want to be certain that you're starting to talk almost every day, right? Just to kind of keep the communication lines open to get to a smooth closing. In that week, you want to do a bunch of things. I've given you a short list here of things. So there's certainly others, but you can start with number 29. Make calls to remind them that they have to put termination notices in, or at least transfer notices in, right, to any utilities. They may have to call for a tank reading, an oil tank reading, if they heat with oil. Why do they call? What's that call about? Why do you call the oil company if you heat with oil and you're the seller and you're getting ready to sell? What are you arranging?
Final measurement.
Yeah, right. So the oil company will come and stick the tank because why?
You need to know at closing.
Yeah, why do you need to know at closing?
I think
Hey, who the cost?
yeah.
Whether the buyer has to reimburse the seller, I would guess, or the.
Exactly right. The buyer buys the oil in the tank, right? So you need to know how much the oil is in the tank so you can convert that into dollars so the buyer can then pay the seller at the closing table. So really important that that gets done. And again, I've had people come to me and say, oh man, the closing is delayed and they have to put money in escrow because the seller didn't call the oil company. Like, oh my goodness, you're kidding. And so, was that on your reminder checklist to make sure that the seller kind of checked that off the list? I said, well, no, like what? Yeah, you don't get to sit back and say, oh, bad seller, right? The seller is our responsibility. So that's why it's on the list. That's why we're going to be having that conversation to just remind them. I would remind them and then I would follow up 2 days later and say, hey, did that get done? Right? Just so we know, because everything that we do is about having a smooth closing. Speak to their attorney, make sure that nothing else might need apportioning, such as like there are some houses that are on like public water or whatnot, that where you apportion the water bill. D, take care of any change of address that has to happen, right, with perhaps the postal service. They need to change the address on their license. I think in the state of Connecticut, you have 30 days when you change your physical address. I think you have 30 days to change your license. So again, a reminder that they need to do that because they're still trying to pack all the things they've collected over the last however many years into boxes that don't ever seem big enough and try and keep the household running while they're doing all of that. So all these small things they kind of lose them. What I love is I know some people have taken this and just kind of created like a smart plan in Command. And so a week before the closing, they launch the week before closing smart plan. And so every day something goes out to them that says, hey, don't forget about this. Hey, don't forget about that. Right. And then they're following up with some phone calls. So I love that idea of automating it so that it's not forgotten. And following up with a phone call to make sure that you're keeping the lines of communication open. Remind them to gather all the keys for closing day. I will tell you, one of the last houses I bought, one of the last investment properties I bought, I said to my attorney, I said, well, what are they doing with the keys? I have to have my property manager go and pick up the keys. And what came back was, oh, we don't have any keys. Okay, what? Okay, well, I think you should go and make some then. Like, go figure that out. And if you have to change all the locks to give me a nice set of keys at closing, then go ahead and do that. Well, the tenants have the keys. Okay, well, they're not my tenants yet. They're your tenants. And I expect a full set of keys at closing. So go figure it out, right? Luckily, it was days before the closing or a week or so before the closing because we were going through a checklist to make sure that all these things were handled. And they were able to, I don't know what they did. I don't care what they did, but they got me my keys, right? And of course, gather any warranties or user's manuals for appliances, any stuff that they've accumulated, right? Have a little pile in a drawer, right? An empty drawer for keys and manuals and all that good stuff. And then remind them, just in case there's an inclusion or an exclusion that might be a little bit atypical. Remind them that, yes, the extra downstairs refrigerator was part of the contract. Please don't have the movers take that. Right? Because sometimes stuff happens. Or if there was a specific exclusion, did you ever hear my story about the anvil? Do you know what an anvil is? Remember like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? An anvil is what the coyote was always trying to push off the cliff to go and smash the coyote. Mimi.
I've learned the hard way the importance of looking at the exclusions and exclusions shortly before the close, because I have done final walkthroughs where I wasn't quite sure, and it's not a good feeling.
Yeah, no.
Not a good feeling.
No, well, and in this case, we had a property up in the Knolls here in Richfield, and there was an anvil, a massive anvil in the garage, bolted into the foundation. And so I happened to represent the buyer, and so it was purposely excluded from the sale. Let me restate that. It was excluded to the point that we said that must be removed, right? Do not leave that there. I know it's bolted to the foundation. However, we want it unbolted from the foundation and taken away. And of course, we got to the walkthrough, and there the anvil sat in the garage because the sellers didn't want to have to handle that. And what we knew was then, it's an anvil. It probably weighed a ton. I mean, it was old and it was, steel or whatever they're made of. It would have cost the buyers a fortune to figure out how to get somebody in and then dispose of that properly. Remember, typically when you get rid of things at the dump, you pay by weight. So that would have been problematic. All right. So again, you're kind of prepping everybody on the seller side. Are you prepared to close? Did you take everything you were supposed to take? And are you leaving the things that you were supposed to leave? Another quick little aside. I one time got to I was actually called, I was the listing agent. I was called the morning of a closing to say, Rick, we have a really big problem. I said, I don't believe in problems. So tell me what's going on and we can certainly foster a solution for you. Well, we just got to the house, and do you know that gorgeous garden all across the front of the house that had all those huge, gorgeous roses in them? Yes. Well, they're all gone. What do you mean they're all gone? What's all gone? Well, all the rose bushes, they're all gone. I said, do you mean like the deer ate them overnight? No, there are holes in the garden bed where all the beautiful rose bushes. The sellers decided at the last minute, you know what, we're not going to leave our roses. So they dug up all the landscaping. They dug up all the roses and took them. Oh, my stars. So I called the sellers and said, hey, guys, I understand that a credit for landscaping is going to be discussed. I'm not sure if you've heard from your attorney yet, but I just wanted to give you a little heads up. Unless you're at Home Depot right now purchasing replacements, I think we're going to have a conversation. Well, we don't understand. There are rose bushes. Yeah, but they're kind of considered to be part of the property. If you were going to exclude them, you should have excluded them up front, right? People paid for the rose bushes. And it wasn't like a rose bush. I mean, this was like the landscaping in front of the house, all these gorgeous rose bushes. Craziness, just crazy. So you just never can tell how people will think, what people feel entitled to. So when you're the listing agent, part of number 29 is to just make sure you're having conversation. Don't assume anything and make sure people aren't acting kind of crazily. Number 30, find out if the seller's needs if the seller needs assistance in any way, meeting the deadline to be packed and out of the house. Again, you're going to always be checking, how's the packing, how's the packing, how's the packing, how's the packing. Only 4 days left, how's the packing? Only 3 days left, how's the packing? Right? 31. And I kind of love this one. We still do it to this day. And it's the thing that our seller clients, I think, just remember us and appreciate us the most for. It's the idea of knowing when the main move out day is and letting the sellers know that you'll be providing lunch on that day, right? And that lunch goes for any member of the family who happens to be helping them move out and pack that day. If there's professional movers, we started asking how many moving people do you have and what time do you think they'll be there? And we started just including them in lunch as well. And we started doing that. The last time I moved, I can remember my movers were out doing what they were supposed to be doing. It was late morning. And in the distance, like as all of my furniture is being taken out of the house and put on the front lawn, my couch, my bed, like everything that you don't want to have on your front lawn. In the not terribly far away distant horizon was these big storm clouds. And I'm looking at the movers thinking, oh, you guys have to kind of hustle here to get all this in the back of that truck so it doesn't get poured on. And I turned around for 1 minute and all of a sudden the movers are in the cab of the truck and the truck is starting to move. I'm like running after them saying, oh, where are you going? And they stopped and they said, well, it's 11:45. We're going to lunch. Like, lunch? All my stuff's on the front lawn. What do you mean you're going to lunch? So in our version of sending lunch, we always send lunch for all of the moving people too, to try and keep them on the property. Keep them moving, keep them focused, right? It doesn't have to be a big extravaganza. A couple of pizza pies and some soda works. We always do a 4-foot kind of hoagie or hero or whatever you're calling it. Grinder, depends on where you're from, what you call it, right? With some utensils and some napkins and some cans of soda or whatnot. Case of water always helps. So just recognize that there's stuff you can start doing towards the end there that really makes a big difference. Because think about it, that day, the refrigerator is empty because it's already been cleared out. Even if there is some food still left in the fridge, all the plates and the utensils, everything's packed. Right? Everyone's hot and sweaty. So when that food arrives, it's a nice break for everybody and it is appreciated. Number 32, make sure the lockbox comes off the house, order the sign down, take your sign-in materials, right? All in these last few days of the listing. You do want to make sure as the listing agent that if you're removing the lockbox from the house and the buyer's agent needs to enter the house to do a walkthrough, that they know the lockbox has been removed so that you don't have to field a frantic phone call once they arrive. Maybe they just have to come to your office to pick it up. I'll give you another quick story. I one time was, my office address where I went every day was on Main Street in Ridgefield. And I had sold somebody a house really on the tail end of Monroe, like the other side of Monroe, the east side of Monroe. So from downtown Ridgefield to the east side of Monroe, like you might as well be going to Rhode Island right at that point. At least that's what it seemed like to me at that moment in time. And so I had these buyer clients, I met them at the office, I drove up to Danbury, over 84, back down 34, over across Monroe, get to the house, to walk through the house with them and find that there is no more lockbox. So I call the listing agent immediately. She doesn't pick up. There is no office because this happened to be one of those like single person mom and pop brokerage deals. So it was just her. And so I'm calling and calling and calling and calling and calling, and she's not answering the telephone. There is no one else to call because it's only just her. There's nobody else in an office sitting someplace. I thought, okay, well, now what do we do? Luckily, I do have some skills other than just real estate. And so we kind of searched the property and found a laundry room window that was not all the way locked. The screen was still there. And so I said to the buyers, I said, okay, look, this is about to be your house. Do I have your permission to cut a small slit in either side of the screen so I can pop the screen hooks out and get the screen out so we can get this window open? They're like, yeah, absolutely. And then of course we had to figure out how to get in the window. It was high enough that, you know, nobody could just kind of step in the window. So luckily, the buyer client was bigger than me. And so he kind of lifted me and pushed me through the window, and in I went. So that was kind of fun. And yet, what's my point? My point is the listing agent never bothered to tell me that the lockbox was being removed, so I had to go and get the key from her before the walkthrough. She knew when the walkthrough was, didn't tell me, and I was already across the county with buyers in tow, right? So it ends up being a fun story to tell, and we had a good time together. However, it could have turned into kind of a catastrophe in that we may have had to go all the way back to Danbury, which is where her office was, get the key, go all the way back to Monroe, and then go all the way back to Ridgefield to close. So communication is key in that respect. Make sense? Okay. The other moral of that story is if you ever have to break into a house, make sure you ask permission before you cut little slits in the screens of the people who are actually buying it, so it doesn't become a walkthrough issue, right? I could just see, we get me in, I open the door, we do our walkthrough, and they get to the closing table and say to their attorney, you know, everything's fine except there's these two big slits in the laundry room screen that we're gonna want repaired. So I did ask permission before I did it. Number 33, make sure the sellers know when the buyer's agent will do the walkthrough with the buyers. This is kind of just what we talked about. Number 34 dates this document, so my apologies there, because for all intents and purposes, the day of attending closings, at least the way we used to do closings, which was the buyers and the sellers and their attorneys and their agents all kind of arrived at the same time, at the same place, and all sat in a big room, held hands, sang Kumbaya, and process the closing. That's not really how things occur anymore, right? Generally speaking, buyers and sellers are hardly ever in the same room during closing any longer. And oftentimes we're not there either. What I would say to you is, you know, make the closing into something memorable for the seller. If that means you're not there, make sure that maybe the night before there's maybe you send them a little bottle of champagne, or you drop something off at wherever they're staying if they're not staying at their house. Make the closing memorable, because the closing is where you're going to ask for and obtain testimonials, right? Could you say something wonderful about me and my business? I love the written testimonial. What I love more is a video testimonial from your clients, right? In a perfect world, you'll get both, because you can use them sort of differently. Number 35, report the property is sold in the MLS. You do have 48 hours from the closing day to get that done. Follow up with the seller 24 hours after the closing just to check in, right? Doesn't matter if they're staying local or getting on a plane and heading out west. Doesn't matter where they're going. 24 hours, tops 48, you want to have a conversation. Phone-to-phone conversation. Just wanted to call and say thank you so much. I so appreciate your business. I hope the transaction was everything that you hoped it would be. Are you settled in where you're headed next? Right? Maybe you sold them a house, so now they're also your buyers, but maybe you didn't. Maybe they were heading out. So regardless of where their next destination is, you want to be certain that you are making some phone calls post-closing. If a closing gift is part of your deal, go ahead and make sure that that gets either sent to them post-closing or delivered prior to the closing, whichever makes the best sense for you. And then after your 24-hour, 48-hour follow-up, you also want to follow up again within the first 7 days. So it's within the first day or two, then again before day 7. And then I would add just one more so it matches both the orphan program and the buyer side of this that we'll get to tomorrow, on Tuesday. And that is a third phone call within 30 days. So it's 48 hours, 7 days, 30 days. So within the first month, that client that you just closed hears from you 3 times just to check in, just to say thank you, just to be appreciative. By the way, it's also to make sure that they are remembering you and perhaps passing you some referrals. Right? That first call for me was always just thank you so much. How's it going? Are you settling in? Are you still traveling? Maybe they're driving across the country, so having a little chat with you is killing some time. The second phone call was, how's it going? Hey, just wanted to make sure everything went really went well for you. Curious, who do you know that might need my services next? Now that we've completed our transaction together, who do you know that might need my services next? Don't forget to ask for referrals in those follow-up phone calls. And then, of course, you're going to place the seller on your post-close follow-up system, otherwise known as the 36Touch program that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, right? So that seller, if they weren't already on it, gets added in. Maybe they get added to a slightly different. If they stayed local, they're on your regular 33Touch. If they moved away, you might have a past clients that are no longer local category that get touched maybe once a month for referrals. So you want to make sure that you have them added to whatever system you're going to have to communicate with them over a long period of time. Troubleshoot items along the way. And then, of course, number 41, the most important one, go list another. Make sense? What questions do you have about the anatomy of a seller transaction? Questions going once? Going twice? Christine.
Yeah, it's something that you touched on earlier, and it could be a silly question, but I'm not sure. Now that you brought it up, I thought, So I've got a client, we're closing in July, August. They have a big light fixture that they want to take with them. It was not included in the inclusion list. So their feeling is they don't have to replace it. Do they have to?
It's a lighting fixture, you said?
Yes.
So here's my personal opinion about fixtures, right? Fixtures are attached to the house.
Right.
And so there's a reasonable expectation that if it wasn't specifically excluded, even if you didn't check the box that said included, there's an assumption that fixtures are included. So if it wasn't specifically excluded, then I would say there is an expectation that something shows up there, right? And if it were me, I would have the conversation now with the other side to say, you know what, we just realized that this dining room chandelier is actually not included in the sale. We want to do one of two things. We either want to replace it so that you have one there for closing, or see what the buyers want. I would just have the conversation up front so it doesn't become an issue with hours to go before the closing.
Yeah, I did. And, she didn't like that idea. But I'm going to rehab that conversation with her as well, just to kind of not insist, but just imply, we want this to go as smoothly as possible. Go get a $100 one at Home Depot,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because what you don't want is for the buyers to walk in and be like, wait a minute, I can't even turn a light on in here, right? It's dark. Now, depending on, if they didn't exclude it and it's a valuable chandelier, maybe it's not terribly valuable, it just has sentimental value. That's one thing. If it's like this crystal gorgeous diamond encrusted whatever, like that hung in the Paris Opera House and that happened to end up in their dining room, right? Then you have for replacing it with something from Home Depot is probably less desirable. But you'll have to just weigh those pros and cons. The last thing I would say is, if in fact the sellers themselves are still resistant to the idea, I would engage their attorney to kind of help you out and prod them along to do the thing that needs doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Because here's the thing, if you don't take care of it now, right, you're just going to have to be scrambling at the last minute, and then everybody's upset. And frankly, I think when you wait on those scenarios, it ends up costing the seller more money because you now have to have a fast fix instead of let's give each other time. You know, I have run my entire career, and for the most part lived my entire life from the perspective of two things. Like, if you're unsure, well, you're really sure, right? And what that means is if you're ever thinking about something, you think, I'm just not sure what the right answer is. The answer is you're sure. Your gut is almost always correct in that. And so the same thing in these scenarios. And the other is, when in doubt, proactively disclose. Just overtell people things, right?
Yeah. The other thing I think is, when you have people like that, sometimes it's hard to see because, you're the ones who, like, whatever, maybe paid a lot of money, already, and you don't want to, buy the cheap $20, you don't want to spend another dime, but it's almost like to put it back on them. Like, I feel like if they moved into a house and they get there in their house that they're moving into, and there's a chandelier there and then all of a sudden it's gone, like, anybody would think like, oh, I thought that was included because it wasn't excluded. And now it's almost like it's the, you wouldn't have noticed it. If maybe if there was another chandelier or something, you might not have been big. But I always feel like they wouldn't want to move into a house where, like you say, you come in and they can't turn the light on or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Sadly, we're dealing with not very reasonable.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying sometimes
Yeah.
if it helps, I don't know. Sometimes you try to use the reverse, like,
Yeah.
hopefully you go,
Yeah.
everything's included, or maybe you should check that everything's included.
Well, here's my advice on that big picture, right? Big picture, it's probably a conversation that can be had right in the beginning of while you're literally standing in the house. By the way, one of the things I'd like you to do before we meet again in my office on Tuesday night to have this consultation is make a list of everything in the house that you intend to take with you that might be screwed to the walls, right? That way we're just prepared and we can have a conversation on Tuesday around what we may need to do. Because if they were always taking that chandelier, I would have encouraged them to take it down and put something else up before the house even went on the market. Right. So that's the other way that you can, and sometimes they don't tell you until the very end, right?
Exactly.
It kind of springs up on you like, okay, well, now we have
We
to
really did love that chandelier.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We thought we hated it, but now we love it. Really? Okay. And so this interesting story on my drive home after being with you guys last night, I spoke to one of your colleagues who said, I have an issue and I'm pretty sure I understand my responsibility here. However, the seller and their attorney have me doubting myself. Do you mind if I throw it past you? And I said, no, go ahead. Agent took a listing and is just waiting on the secondary documentation to come back. And as the listing agreement was supposed to come back, the agent makes a phone call, the seller makes a phone call and says, you know what, I was talking to my attorney. My attorney said that they would love to see the contract before I send it back to you. Do you mind if I send it to my attorney? And the agent was like, no, go by all means, have at it. And so the contract gets sent to the attorney. She goes to pick up she goes to have a conversation with the attorney just to get the thumbs up that the contract is all hunky-dory and everything's moving forward. And she asks the attorney, after having a conversation with the agent, about the underground oil tank that was abandoned, supposedly legally abandoned, right? Which is a version of underground oil tanks. That's kind of like underneath a part of the driveway or something. It's in a really weird spot, so they didn't remove it to not disturb the driveway. However, they legally abandoned it. And so our agent asked, that's typically fine. Do you have the documentation so that documentation can be passed along at closing to outline how it was done? And the woman said, yes, absolutely. I'll gather that up and I'll give it to you when I see you on, whatever day. So Tuesday comes and the agent's supposed to see her today Tuesday comes and she calls the agent and says, so I just talked to my attorney and he's fine with the contract. However, I asked the same question of my attorney about the underground oil tank. And he told me that I should just keep my mouth shut about it. And that if anyone ever asked, I could simply say, my husband used to do that and he died, so I didn't know about it. I thought to myself, I'm sorry, who told her this? Yeah, her attorney. I said, okay, what's this attorney's name? Because I think they're going up on the wall to say, when you see this name, run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. So he said to me, so I'm not mistaken, right? That's kind of like a material fact. And she has a responsibility to disclose it. And now that I know about it, I have a proactive duty to disclose it. And I said, yes, and yes, you're 110% right? Don't let somebody make you think you're crazy. And he said, well, I appreciate that, but I'll tell you, when she came back and said, my attorney said this, I thought, maybe I'm off base on this. Said, no, I think the path forward here is when you meet with her, I'll find out when I'm finished with class tonight how this all went, because I think he's actually meeting with her now. So you think you need to have a conversation that says, look, I've been digesting what you said about the underground oil tank, and I have a few concerns. Do you mind if I share my concerns with you? Again, I understand that this is your advice of your attorney. However, he said to me, I'm going to ask her, did the attorney also say, I'll represent you for free when you get sued? And so, yeah, that's a good question, right? Get it in writing, baby. But can you imagine? Just don't say anything. And if it comes up, you can play the dumb widow. That's pretty much what he said to her. So I said, you know what, you know what you have to do. You have to have a conversation that kind of talks about honesty and doing the right thing and putting yourself as a seller in jeopardy for things like non-disclosure of material facts. I mean, the reality is any court, any judge that gets a hold of that and says, okay, so wait, you lived there? It doesn't matter to me if your husband handled it or not. You lived there, right? You lived there for how long? Oh, 37 years. And you're going to plead ignorance as to that doesn't fly. That doesn't fly. Right? So the reality is buried oil tanks can be a big deal or they cannot be a big deal. The answer to almost every question that comes up for you will be err on the side of disclosure. Like disclose, disclose, disclose. Tell the truth. Always tell the truth. And not a version of the truth. Just tell the simple, honest truth. This is what it is and this is what it's not. Right? And encourage your clients to do the same. Because hiding in the bushes, that doesn't work, right? You wouldn't tell your kids it's okay to lie. Right? So why would we encourage clients to do the same? Anyway, I just thought you might enjoy that story, because that literally happened like 22 hours ago as I was driving home from meeting with you guys. So there's still people out there, right? The Y4C2Ts, what's the W stand for in the Y4C2Ts? Stands for win-win or no deal. What's the I stand for? Integrity, do the right thing, right? Those are the two most important tenets of our belief system. Have integrity, do the right thing, disclose, disclose, disclose. Well, what if that comes back to bite me? Yeah, that's the whole point. If it comes back to bite you now, as you're listing the property, you've got plenty of time to figure out a solution. If it comes back to bite you a day before the closing, you don't have time and it will cost you more. And worst case scenario, if it comes back after the closing, now you've got yourself in a big puddle of you know what, right? I'll tell you what, when I Carolyn, I'll get there in just half a second. I'm going to tell a quick story and then I'll answer your question. When I bought my house, my first house in Richfield, we were told that there was an oil tank in the ground back by the pool. Under it, we had like a screened-in porch that went out to a pool, and that it was removed. and it was removed, and they kind of re-supported the screened-in porch because it was partially under the screened-in porch. Like, okay, great. And they literally gave us documentation that said what had been removed. And about 3 months after we moved in May. By the end of the summer, after a full summer of rain and pool use and whatnot, we started to see this like little sinkhole by the stairs coming down from the screened-in porch to the pool. And as the sinkhole got bigger, we kind of like started poking around in there, and we didn't have to push anything too far before we heard donk, donk, donk. And it wasn't that Law and Order was on television. It was that we had an oil tank still in the ground. So craziness, like stuff happens. Did we call our attorney? Yes. Did the attorney call the other attorney? Yes. Did they all say, my goodness, we thought it was removed? Really? Did you stand there and watch it be removed? Because it's still there. And what was fascinating was they had documentation from a removal company that said it had been removed. I still to this day can't quite explain what occurred. So they came back to the table, and the seller paid for a different mitigation company to come and actually remove it. And it was, no harm, no foul. It all worked out. There was no contamination, all the good stuff. But it could have gone a whole different way, right? So you just never know. Be prepared for anything. Carolyn, sorry, go ahead.
No, it was more or less a statement.
Yes, ma'am.
When it comes down to lawyers and real estate agents in the past, they always had this negative vibe, for lack of a better word. And then to still have people that are still doing this, it's like you're trying to change the culture, trying to change the way people think of us. And then when you're still dealing with people of that nature, it's just disturbing. Yeah,
you said it. That is very true. Unfortunately, that cliche of it only takes one rotten apple to spoil the whole cart, right? That exists for a reason, and it is 100% true. And the best we have to offer is to show up honorably every single day, without judgment, respectful of every human in our transactions and outside of our transactions, and do the best we can to be good stewards of our industry. Anything else? Anything else before we move off of sellers? Any other questions you have about being a listing agent? Now, there are certain things we did not cover, like we did not go through the listing contract. We will do that Monday at, I think, 1 o'clock in our Forms 101 class. If you need it before then, I do have a video on YouTube that we have recorded. And we also didn't really talk through listing services, right? So once you put the listing on, what is it you're doing to market the listing and all that kind of stuff? We do offer that in a separate course as well, just not as a part of Ignite. So anything else before we move forward into the buyer arena?
Rick?
Yes.
I'd sort of like to go back to what we were talking about yesterday with the whole the comps and the agreeing or not agreeing. And, if we use the example, I think we were at 475 and you said 475, 490, about the same. If you start getting higher into.
Oops, Frank, you got muted somehow.
Different. But what if you're in that, let's say, uncomfortable zone that you're not comfortable with, but the seller is, let's say, adamant about, or they really want to? It's better to take the listing and work through it, right? Or does that need approval from your side as the broker to sign off and say, we're listing something that's out of what we consider the correct comps?
Got it. So I'll answer the second question first and then the first question second. So the second part of your question, does that need approval of any sort? Understand that in our organization, we fully understand that you are independent contractors who grow, run, and make decisions about your own business. And we very much respect that first and foremost. And so you don't really need my approval to do much of anything. We trust that you will make the decisions that work best for you and support those decisions. If you need assistance in making a decision or getting to a decision point, we are there as a support system to help walk you through that. But you certainly don't need you certainly don't need my permission, right? And that goes from taking listings, not taking listings. It flows to the commissions that you take. There are some organizations out there that if you take less than a 5% listing, when you close, so say you take a 4.5% listing, right? You offer 2.5 out and you keep 2. There are a lot of organizations out there that if you do that and it's below that 5% total, when you close, you get 2%. However, they calculate what they get as if you got 2.5%. They then take their portion based on 2.5% and you're left with the rest, right? That, again, that doesn't seem like partnership to me. And so to me, being in business with you guys and basing it off of a platform of partnership and support is what it was my expectation when I entered this business. I didn't quite get it from the broker that I worked with, mostly because he was a broker who really believed that I worked for him. You will never hear me say that, right? I believe that we are partners in business and do everything I can do every day to be a good partner to you. And then the only thing I expect back is that it's important to you to be a good partner, back to me. So the quick answer, Frank, is no, you get to make those decisions, right? Your policies, your business decisions are supported based on you making decisions that are best for you and your business. The first part of the question is have a policy. My answer is simply have a policy, right? There will be scenarios where you will sit at the conference room table and think, you know what? I just don't think this is for me. The sellers are looking for something that's way out of whack. They're combative. They're not really listening. They're not participatory. Maybe they're speaking to you in a manner that doesn't seem like a partnership, right? That's how I made my judgment calls. There were times where I would sit with people who I just thought had this air of superiority around them. And I thought, you know what, if this is unpleasant for the first hour, how unpleasant is it going to be after the first week or the first 2 weeks, right? And is this something I'm interested in pursuing? So I would make decisions not just based on cooperation and pricing and positioning and whatnot. I'd make it based on other things. Now, understand that the only way you get to do that and still earn the way you want to earn is if you have a lead generation strategy that backs that freedom up, right? That to me is working towards having the freedom because I lead generated a high level, I get to choose who I want to move forward and be in business with, right? If you're not lead generating at a high level, I will tell you, because I've been in both spots. If you're not lead generating at a high level and some jerk comes to the table and wants to price it way high, you feel kind of desperate I need something, I need anything, right? Even if it's a chance it might sell, and you start saying yes, and you start kind of conceding and backing off of your own policies. I don't encourage that, right? Does that answer both sides of that question, Frank?
Yes, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
If it's not let's say an attitude thing or if it's only the price point though, it's our call. Take it and hope that either it works out or they finally decide that you have to come down to the price that you suggested or not suggested, but
yeah, well, that the market suggested.
Exactly, that you were pointing at. So, okay, fine. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, having that policy to know kind of what's within your tolerance. As I said, mine's about 8 to 10%. So I'd be okay, but we'd have a conversation first. And that conversation looked something like this. So Frank, it looks like you and I may need to agree to disagree on exactly what the data is saying here. I see you're passionate about the number that you put on the table. I am passionate about helping you achieve your goal. And so I'm curious, maybe we could kind of meet in the middle. Let me suggest this. Let's put the property on the market for the number that you suggested. And again, now before I'd have this conversation, as I demonstrated, I think for you yesterday, Frank and I would have a conversation that says, Frank, all other things aside, and again, I'm not going to hold you to your answer, but all other things aside, just based on the data that you see on the table, if you were objectively positioning this particular property, not yours, just one that was almost like yours, in today's market, where would you put it to get the next best buyer? Right? You have to help the seller recognize that what they want and what the data says are two different things, and be okay admitting that. Right? I'm not going to make you wrong about where you want to go. I'm happy to test the waters with you at certain levels. But we'll have a conversation. And again, the script for that for me was, it sounds like we may need to agree to disagree. Right? That's different than, well, you know what? You're looking to be unreasonable and the data kind of is reasonable. And so therefore, no, it's just about agreeing to disagree. You're here, I'm there. I'm not really anywhere. I'm just kind of trying to support what the data says. And let's move forward and pre-sign a production document so that 2 weeks from now, if in fact we don't have the result that you are planning on having at this particular number, we move to your next number, which is supported by the data.
I'm sorry, I'm going to continue on the same topic, really. Yesterday, you were avoiding in the role play of giving any number at all, right? You're making the seller come up with a number.
Before you continue down that path, let me just clarify something that you said so that we're clear, and then you can ask the question.
Okay.
So yesterday, what I indicated was, if someone gave me a number that I didn't think was supported by the facts, I wouldn't repeat that number, right? I do believe that by bringing the facts to the table, we are in fact delivering a number. We're just not highlighting it and stating it, right? Because think about it, we gave them 3 best sold comps at 475, 465, and 467, whatever the numbers I said yesterday. And we're giving them the actives, the competition in that pocket, in that range of right where they're supposed to be. So we're actually bringing a whole lot of numbers to the table that all point to a specific spot. We're just not stating it. We want them to kind of self-discover through the data exactly where they're supposed to go, which is basically what you said, but it could have been heard 2 different ways. So I just wanted to clarify. So now go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So then the seller suggests the higher number, and then there was the exchange with what leads you to believe or support that number that you're going. If the seller says, comes back with a direct question, what do you think? What number do you think? Do you at that point just say, well, look at those comps, something in that range?
Yeah, so great question.
Avoiding an exact number?
Yeah. And so my scripts for the what do you think have always been around something to the effect of, I appreciate you asking. What is interesting is I don't have a stake in your property, right? And so my opinion about the value of your home is not really relevant, which is why I keep pushing us back to the factual data that I've brought for us to review. Trust me when I tell you, I won't allow you to make a mistake without telling you that I think you're making a mistake. However, I am not going to be so bold as to sit across the table from you and tell you how to value your own asset. It's not my asset, it's yours. You get to make those decisions. I'm here to support it from underneath and help guide you to make the best decision possible. Does that,
Again,
does that solve the problem? Sometimes. Are there some people who say, so you're just not going to answer the question? Well, you are certainly free to perceive me as kind of avoiding the question. However, what I really want you to understand is that, again, from a partnership perspective, this isn't my house to price. And I believe that. I don't want someone coming and telling me what something I own and trying to sell is worth. So why would I look to, well, you're supposed to be the expert. You know what? I appreciate that. And I agree with it. I believe I am the expert. And what I'm expert in is locating very specific data points and then talking you through those data points so that you, as the owner of this asset, can make the best decision possible. And as I stated earlier, Frank, I will not let you make the wrong decision without telling you that I think you may be pedaling down the wrong path.
So quickly, Steve, so it's not about what your home is worth, it's how we can position it properly to get the most money for the sale.
You got it. 100%, Jonathan, 100%. As a matter of fact, I don't think I said this yesterday. I don't use the word pricing much anymore because it's not about price, right? I use the word positioning because it's about positioning. Right? Think about it. When supermarkets have too much inventory, so they bought too many Honey Nut Cheerios, too many boxes of Honey Nut Cheerios, what do they do to get rid of them?
They put them in the front.
Yeah, they change the positioning. Now, they may also change the price, but I don't know if you've ever noticed how grocery stores work. Some things on the ends of the aisles are on sale. Other things are not. And they do that because you see the sale item and think, ooh, I could use one of those, it's on sale. Oh, but I could also use that, right? So they put the Ronzoni pasta on sale for 99 cents a box, but then the expensive sauce is underneath it. That's not on sale. That's all about positioning. Because when you buy the Ronzoni on sale, you think, well, I also need some sauce. And instead of going down 2 aisles and all the way up the other end, I'm just going to get this one here. Because the psychology is, well, the Ronzoni is on sale. Maybe this is on sale too. Or it's convenience, right? But I want you to think about the analogy of supermarkets. They use positioning as well as pricing, but they use positioning to make a point. They use positioning to get the inventory sold. It's not all that different from what we're talking about. And I like the conversation about positioning yet again, because your competition talks about price. And so I want you to go left when they go right and have a conversation about positioning, right? Positioning has everything to do, if in the example that we used yesterday that Frank reminded us about, where the right number-ish was anywhere from that 475 to 490 or 95 range, right? That was kind of that sweet spot that we determined based on those comps. Yes. Well, if you have, wow, I completely lost my train of thought. I am certain what I was going to say was brilliant. Give me a second, it'll come back. Oh, maybe it won't come back. I can't remember where I was going. So it'll come back to me. So let's just keep moving forward. Go ahead, Carolyn. Did you have a question?
No, but can I make a point?
Yes, Tony.
This is very appropriate for me because I'm coming out of a situation where I took a listing and I took it at a time when the market was probably the top of its fluidity, and we went with a number that, you know, I thought I'd give it a try, and my takeaway from it was, and you're summing it up. I mean, you is that it's not it's not, obviously we want to sell the house, but we want to make sure that we get picked. And we want to get picked by the right buyers, because my listing got offers, but it was from the wrong buyers. And they didn't stick around. So you want to get picked by, in this economy or this market, more buyers and better buyers. And my experience was so painful because my seller would keep calling me saying, why aren't we selling? There's no inventory out there. And we had a good rapport, and I would say to him, it's like the real estate equivalent of being the last kid to be picked for the baseball team.
Yeah.
We're not getting picked.
Yeah.
You know, so it's how do you get picked by the right buyers and in today's market, the most buyers.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the idea of, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? It's all those different analogies work, and at some point you have to have the conversation with the seller that says, okay, so I want you to recognize one of the things that is happening here. Your home is being utilized as a tool to sell all these other properties. And what I mean by that is listing agents are using your property as a tool to say, okay, so this property is on for this much money and offers X. We're on for this much money, which is a little bit less, and offers the same or more. It's always a value conversation, right? And so you have to help them see that you're being utilized as a tool to sell everybody else's property. What do we need to do to make sure that you are now the one that goes next? Oh, and I remembered what I was going to say, and then Ronnie, I'll come to you.
Okay.
So where I was going to go with you was from a positioning perspective. If in the example that we used yesterday, that 475 to 490 or 95 was the sweet spot, looking at the list of actives, the competition, sellers now have to make a decision, right? Maybe that perfect spot of 489, which is what they determine is the best place to pop their property on to get offers and attention. Maybe of the 20 properties that are on the market, 10 of them are all priced in and around 489. So now you look at, from a positioning perspective, you think, okay, well, is that the best place to be? Am I entering too crowded a field? Might I get lost? And so I would look at that and then ask that question. If Donna had said, I think 489 is the perfect spot. Excellent. You know what? I could not agree more. However, Donna, I just want to point one thing out. What do you notice about the number of properties that are being offered right now, right at that 489 level, compared to some other numbers in and around that 489 level? Right? And Donna might look at it and say, well, yeah, there seem to be a bunch more. Got it. And so, Donna, I'm curious, what do you know about price pointing? Right. So maybe we could look at, from a price pointing perspective, if that's the best position for you, if that's the best number for you, how do we adjust our positioning to be even more competitive than those properties that are all being offered for 489 and separate us from the crowd a little bit? Right. And here's the interesting part. Donna may say, well, 479 or 485. She may say 495. And in that scenario, if I'm in agreement with 489 as a place to put the property, well, then I'm also in agreement with either 485, 479, or 495, right? Either way, that we're sorting ourselves out so we stand out a little bit more. That's where positioning comes into play, right? The numbers point us here. Now we have to look and see where we're going to position ourselves against the competition to make sure that we're the next best property for someone to make an offer on. Ronnie, go ahead.
In similar lines, I was saying, with Frank, I was thinking of your dilemma and stuff. It's not, it shouldn't be so much that you think this is a bad number or whatever. I would just think, I don't know what you think about this, Rick. If they came up with a number, I'm just making it up, and it was 525, maybe even just show them what the homes for 525 are selling for and say, well, does yours have this? And then they say no. And does yours have this? No. So like, if it is an unreasonable, if you think it's an unreasonable number, then maybe you do the comparatives on that number, and then they can say, oh, you're right. Ours doesn't even, we can't compare with that number. Or, the same thing too, what Rick is saying, just as far as more on a line of positioning than, a number. I don't know, that's all. That might help if their number is not in the realm.
Go ahead, Donna.
So the other thing that you've taught me to use when they're pushing back is when you say, so I hear what you're saying. We've reviewed my facts, the facts that I've brought, or the facts. We've reviewed the facts, and you kind of touched the paper that you brought and you said, I'll be happy to look at the facts that you have that support your price. And then you just wait. It does the heavy lifting.
Yeah. Yeah, and either of those scenarios that Donna and Ronnie put on the table can work, right? Here's the word of caution I'll throw out against each of them, and that is you just always want to be certain that you're not taking steps to make the seller feel wrong, right? So it's all in how you have that conversation, right? It's all about how buyers buy. Part of the reason that the SPA asks the seller to choose a property, if they were asked to choose one of these three, right? It doesn't matter which one they choose, by the way. But the reason that's part of the SPA, it's part of the script, is because you want them to model for themselves how their own buyers are going to choose their house. Because buyers always buy based on value. That's just a reality. You should write this down because it's not in your materials. The definition of value. This is an important piece to know, right? This one you should commit to memory because it's a really good conversation piece. And objection handler if used in the right manner. So the definition of value is more for the same or the same for less. Right? The definition of value is more for the same, meaning for the same amount of money, I'm getting more benefits. I'm getting more features. For the same amount of money, I'm getting an extra 300 square feet. I'm getting an extra bedroom. I'm getting more privacy. I'm getting a pool, whatever, right? So more for the same or the same for less, which means if I'm comparing two properties and they are practically identical, the one that presents to me the best value, if they're offering me the same, is the one that I pay less money for, right? So that's the definition of value, more for the same or the same for less. And buyers buy based on perceived value, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you see that one of the things we have to do is create an opportunity for buyers to see the absolute most value in your home? Boy, that's a different conversation than your competitors are having, right? Because a lot of your competitors don't like to talk about value because they think value means bargain or discount. And that's not the same thing. We talked about properties that generally fall in the category of, you know what? You bought this at a discount because of the up driveway, the down driveway, the train tracks in the backyard, the high tension wires, the highway in the front yard, whatever. You bought this at a discount. You can't expect to sell it and not have the same discount show up because there are a couple of those scenarios that create a discount environment. But discount or bargain is not the same as value, right? Value is just simply how a buyer perceives a property. And it is a fact that buyers buy based on perceived value. And that goes from the $125,000 little condo someplace to the $4.5 million spread that you have. Buyers still buy based on value, right? If that weren't true, multi-million-dollar properties would all sell, right? Because then people who can afford multi-million-dollar properties would just go and buy them. But not all of them sell. Why? Because at some point a buyer said, yeah, you know what? For my $4 million, I think this one offers me more than that one. And I'm going to spend my $4 million where I get some value. The concepts aren't different, even if the dollar amounts are different. So be careful about that. Because I think sometimes there's this perception that once you're into the high end and the multi-million dollar properties, that people just spend willy-nilly. That has not been my experience, right? Why do you think these people have $4 or $5 million to spend on a house? Because they don't spend their money willy-nilly, right? They're smart about how they make purchases. Can I show you one more tool, one more thing? I think it came with your materials. I'll throw it on the screen because we're having this conversation. Oops. He says confidently, where is it? There she is. And it's called the selling strategies chart. Again, you got a copy of this in your materials when I sent out the listing scripts, right? The selling strategies chart, these are basically nationalized numbers that say if you're experiencing what's on the left, the solution is on the right. Right? So if you are experiencing, oh, look at that. Number one is actually backwards. I never noticed that before. Number one really should say offers equals priced right, because everything else is left and right. So you'll get my hand. I'll have this fixed and I'll resend it out. But if you're getting offers, well, the property is priced right. If you're receiving showings, however, no offers, well, the solution is an adjustment of 4 to 6%. If you're receiving low showings, well, the solution then is 6 to 12%. And if you're receiving drive-bys only, which is code for no showings, you're minimally 10, probably 12, maybe even 14% off. And I tell you what, these numbers hold up. These numbers hold up even today in the crazy market that we're in. They hold up. And what's spectacular is you can utilize this tool at a listing appointment, at an initial listing appointment, to show them, to say, you know what, here's the good news, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you kind of can't make a mistake, because the market will tell us. I mean, today the market tells us in 3 or 4 days. I was having a conversation with one of your colleagues this morning who put a property on the market last Thursday. And I said to her this morning, I said, so is that gone? And she said, no, it's not. Like, it's not? Are the sellers struggling choosing between the offers? No, we don't have an offer yet. You don't have an offer and it's been on for a week? Okay, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Because today it doesn't take more than a couple of days to have your house get sold. And so I asked some questions. It's like, what was the traffic like? What were the showings like? Oh my goodness, we had more people in 4.5 days than I mean, I can even count. Okay, so on the selling strategies chart, would you qualify it as having showings but no offers? Yes. Okay. 46%. That's what it's telling you. And I can guarantee you that with a reduction of about 5% in that particular property, bam, offers would start coming. Again, it's not rocket science, guys. It's not hard. And the market is very, very clear very quickly. All you have to do is listen to it and have your seller listen to it. I used this with my own grandmother a few years ago when she and my grandfather sold their house to move to a smaller condo as they got older. The property went on the market. I referred somebody down Long Island to handle the business. It was on for 2 weeks, a bunch of showings, no offers. And so I called the agent and said, you know what? It's time. Let's bring it down. I don't want to screw around here. I said, I know I'm not the client. However, let's meet with my grandmother and have a conversation. And she said to me, you know, Rick, I think it's too soon. And I'll never forget that. I think she's a really good real estate agent. But I think that was a misplay on her part. I think it's too soon. Really? It's been 2 weeks. Now, this was a few years ago. The market wasn't moving quite as quickly. But in 14 days, we probably had 20 or 30 showings, right? Here's the other formula you can use. 10 showings, no offers. You've got an issue to address. 2 weeks, I kind of like 10 days. 10 days, no showings, you've got an issue, right? So 10 offers, 10 showings, no offers, you got an issue. 10 days, no showings, you have the same issue. And it's always the same issue. So we sat with my grandmother. And the agent started to talk about what had occurred. And I really tried to keep my mouth shut, but that's not something I'm great at. And so I said to the agent across the table, I said, I'm curious, have you ever seen the selling strategies chart? And she said, you know what, I think I have. And I said, well, that's great, because I happen to have one right here. Boom. And I put that sucker on the table. And at that point, I saw her just kind of lean back and kind of give me the nod to say, all right, you know what? She's your grandmother. Go for it. And I said, Graham, do me a favor. Diagnose what's occurred in the last 2 weeks. And she said, well, if I had to diagnose it, it would be number 2. Okay, so showings and no offers. You know what? I couldn't agree more. The good news is this chart not only offers you a diagnosis, but a cure. So what's the remedy? How do we cure what ails you? She said, well, it says we're 4 to 6% off in the price. I said, yeah, I agree. And so I'm curious, based on that, would you like to make an adjustment of 4, 5, or 6%? Because it said 4 to 6, right? I'm just reading the chart. Would you like to make an adjustment of 4, 5, or 6? And she said, well, I'd like to not make an adjustment at all. However, if what you're telling me is that we have to do that to get the buyers to buy, well, then let's make an adjustment of 4%. So she chose the smaller rate end there. Said, okay, here's what the math says. Is that a number you're comfortable with? Yes, great, sign it up. Let's get it done. Again, this does not have to be hard. And trust me, my grandmother's tough. So if these kinds of concepts work on someone who can be tough about this kind of stuff, trust it. Trust it. By the way, once we made the adjustment, she had 2 full price offers at the new price within 6 days. Again, it's not rocket science. It happens all the time. There's only one reason a house doesn't sell. All right. Should I stop now? Are you bored with my stories? Okay, good.
No.
Good. Got plenty more where that came from. I can torture you all night with stories. Let's go till 7. I'm with you, Jonathan. Julie's making a face though. She's like, okay, what about dinner? I'll go to 7 if someone will like make dinner and deliver it to me. I'm with you there,
Be careful for what you ask for.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right, so let's pivot to the buyer side because we are quickly running out of time. We have 40 minutes tonight and we have our last session on Tuesday. So in 2 hours and 40 minutes, we're going to run you through the buyer consult scripts, which again, you received earlier today via email. So if you don't have them, check your email. They came earlier today. And let's run through this dialogue with buyers. And part of the reason we can go a little faster on the buyer side is because it's very similar to the listing scripts that we just spent a lot of time going through, right? And there's a piece of the buy side scripts that I ask you to kind of check out at home because we don't use them quite as often as we used to. So with that, do you have your Mastering the Buyer Consultation scripts out? Because what I'd like to do is run through step number 1. And step number 1, just like it was on the list side, is setting the stage. And so that setting the stage piece occurs, again, when someone shows up at the office to meet you for an appointment. And this is your appointment for the consultation. Let's take a quick pause and talk a little bit about meeting buyers to take them out to see property without doing a valid consult. Somebody talked to me about, Donna Gilbert just looked at the camera and said, "What on earth did he just say? What? Why on earth would a human being do that?" I have never heard of anything so absurdly ridiculous in my entire life. I can't say that I disagree with that look that you just gave the camera, right? But let's talk about it a little bit, because there's a whole swath of real estate agents, yes, even Keller Williams real estate agents, that still go out with buyers without having a valid consult first. So step number 1, while you're thinking about why that is or is not a good idea, step number 1, as Karen hopefully reiterated yesterday, is you need to be certain that people are able to purchase a property, right? The whole idea of ready, willing, and able gets changed in your world to able, ready, and willing. Don't spend a ton of time, or when I say don't spend a ton of time, like spend very little time with people until you are convinced, based on outside evidence, that they are able to purchase a property today, right? Or else you end up having all these big long conversations about what they're looking for and blah blah, all this stuff when they can't afford to buy a house, right? So be certain that you're confirming their ability before much else occurs. Now, let's get back to the conversation around why is it you might take out a buyer without having a proper consult? Or why would you reject that concept?
They know what they want and it's time sensitive. There's a specific house in mind and it's time sensitive.
So they know what they want. They called you on a specific house. We want to go and buy that house right now.
If all goes well, there will be an offer made.
Okay.
The reason to reject it, isn't it required by law?
So interesting question, Frank. I appreciate that question. So what's interesting is the consult itself is not required by law. However, the result of the consult is required by law, right? So showing somebody a property that's not represented by us does have some rules around it in our state, right? Not in many other states, but in the state of Connecticut, there are some rules, which means you can't cross the threshold. You actually aren't even supposed to begin preliminary negotiations, which means have conversations around properties that someone may decide to purchase without them hiring you and having a written representation agreement in place. So that starts to get tough for me, right? Tony mentioned earlier, well, if there's a property specific that they want to go and just purchase, the law says you're really not supposed to have any kind of interactions with someone without being represented in writing. And so I guess my question then becomes, how are you going to validly sign the buyer agency agreement to check that box without having a consult? Shall I answer that for you as well? Because I know what some of your colleagues do. I'm certain no one on this call. But I do know what some of your colleagues do. And what some of your colleagues do is they decide to check that box of buyer agency agreement in the scenario that Tony put on the table, right? And now, if you notice, I haven't said that Tony's scenario is unrealistic, because I fully recognize that it in the real world that comes up. You just have to figure out what the path forward is, right? And what some of your colleagues do is they quickly DocuSign some documents over to the person that says, okay, you know what, I can meet you there in about 30 minutes to show you this property. You just have to sign a bunch of stuff. So go and do that. I'll meet you there. And here's what inevitably happens 90% of the time. You can take that number to the bank. 90% of the time that you choose to do that, I call that Pop-Tart real estate, right? Someone calls you and suddenly you're like a Pop-Tart in a toaster. Someone calls you and you go, boing, and you pop out of the toaster and you're off and running to go show a property. And you know there's this document, and you know it's against the law to go and do that. So you're trying to figure out how to do it both and not lose the time sensitivity. And 90% of the time, that particular property is not purchased by that particular buyer. And now you've created a scenario where they've signed a buyer agency agreement. They don't know you from Adam, right? Because if they knew you from Adam, you would have had conversations around them being buyers before, right? So I'm trying to put some legs around the scenario that Tony put on the table to just to be fair about, does it come up sometimes? Yes, and yet it probably comes up fewer times than you think, because if you had background with people, you would have been talking to them already, and you would have already set up some kind of consult. So now you're talking about strangers for the most part. So now you have a stranger who you just DocuSigned an agreement to. They didn't read through it. You weren't there to go over it with them. You didn't have a proper consult, so you don't really know what it is they're looking for. You probably aren't too clear about whether they can actually buy a property because you haven't checked ability, because everything was a rush. And here's what's fascinating. Most agents who operate that way then have the nerve to get really defensive about the buyer agreement that the buyers signed. And what I mean by that is when they go and buy something else from somebody else and you find out about it and you have this conversation with them, they're like, well, what are you talking about? We just asked you to go show us that one house. And you say, no, you signed a 3-month agreement with me. And they're like, we didn't even read that. Well, that's your problem. You should never sign something you don't read. Well, so here's what I can tell you about that. Unfortunately, it's not just their problem. It is our problem as well. Because what there is precedent in the court system that says if we then try and pursue a commission based on that agreement with that particular person who now went and bought something else, one of the first things the judge will ask that person is, so I'm curious, was it explained to you what you were signing? What were the circumstances around this conversation? How was it explained? Where were you when it was explained? Give me the details. In other words, the judge asks their version of, did you have a proper consult? And if the answer is no, and then you're under oath, and the answer is no, guess what? You lose anyway. So what's the point I'm trying to make? I hope I'm making a point around the idea that getting out in front of any buyer, even today when things are moving quickly, and having a proper consultation, which doesn't have to take terribly long, right? For me, buyer consults take 30 to 40 minutes longer if you have questions. 30 to 40 minutes longer if you have questions. Now, they always have some questions, so it's always a little bit longer. However, guiding people towards the benefit of sitting down and having a conversation around their needs, their ability, and yes, some documentation that the state requires us to review with you shouldn't be a reason why someone says, you know what, then screw it. I'm not going to go see this house with you. I'm going to call somebody who will do this. And if it is, to me, you've dodged a bullet. You should be thankful that they hung up the phone and decided to go and call somebody else. For what that's worth. Now, there can be agreement, there can be disagreement around what I just said. I will beg you to trust that not having a consult almost every single time results in some issue or experience or scenario that is not positive. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on
Yeah,
that? Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious. Obviously I see that a lot. I see that, you know, whether it be rentals or houses, I see that's happening a lot. I guess I want to hear when you go over the exclusive right to represent a buyer or exclusive right to represent a tenant, and you also, you know, are communicating that in Connecticut, you know, it's the law. How can you tell me what your consultation, like how you present that, I guess is what I'm asking. When you present
it's step 5 in the buyer consult. We're going to do that together.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah. Donna, go ahead.
So I come down pretty strong on this. I basically believe, this is my belief, I believe that not doing a proper buyer consultation prior to showing properties is the same as malpractice. I mean, it says salesperson on our license, and yet we are salespeople in the same vein as financial salespeople. People who have to study, take an exam, also have continuing education requirements because we are fiduciaries. We have a responsibility that's different than somebody who's selling t-shirts at LL Bean or selling cars, even luxury cars. It's a different responsibility. The job is to sit down and make sure that people understand what they are stepping into, what the forms are going to look like, what the process is, finding out what their needs are, because as a fiduciary, it's about what their needs are, not about us and getting a transaction closed. I don't know what you're doing if you don't have that conversation and find out all of those things before you go out. Who are you serving if you're doing that? It's not your client. It could be you. And if you haven't done that, to me, you're not doing your job. And so you shouldn't be compensated for that. So I'm done.
Well, and well, I doubt that. We'll just give you a little more time because it'll come up again, right? But the simple reality is, you know, Donna's 100% right, and what strikes me is I'm not sure how you could do the job that we described, right? Remember what we described your job description as: to interpret current conditions such that the seller can make the best decision possible. If you're not asking all those questions up front and behaving in a fiduciary manner, I'm not sure how you could do that job. You can do a different version of that job, right? But you can't do that job. You can't help the client make the best decision possible because you have no idea who the client is. You have no idea what their circumstances are. You have no idea whether this is right for them or not because you haven't bothered to ask any questions. And what's interesting is, and Julie, I'm coming to you right next. The other thing I've noticed is whenever somebody comes to me and says, I am pulling my hair out, I have shown this person 50 properties, and just not willing, regardless of whether it's today where there's a shortage of inventory and people are fighting, right? Regardless of what the market looks like. I've shown these people 30 properties, 40 properties, 50 properties, 60 properties. I just can't stand them anymore. They're just not buying, or they keep losing properties. Guys, I am sorry that to me, remember when I said to you, when I walked into a house that stunk of whatever, my first thought was not anything about the seller. It was always weak listing agent. Well, when I hear someone complain that they're working with a buyer who has been through 30, 40, 50, 60 houses and they're just not there yet, they're not purchasing, the first question I ask that agent is, I'm curious, did you have a full-blown buyer consult? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is, well, sort of. Okay, well, sort of is no, right? If you didn't have a proper buyer consult, it's no wonder. You don't really know what they're after. You don't know maybe you haven't had an opportunity because you're running around showing them so many houses to actually sit down and have a conversation around what the market is like today. And if they knew that the market was moving as quickly as it was and that they were likely going to have to offer 10 to 12% over the asking price, strip away most of their contingencies, and still run into a struggle if they're not a cash buyer, maybe they would choose to put the brakes on and not go out and torment themselves, right? So I think that we have a responsibility to always look in the mirror and say, okay, how can I do something differently? How can I bring a different level to the table to remove some of that angst from our buyers? Julie, yes, ma'am.
Sorry. I was just going to give an example and going back to the exclusive right to represent.
Yes.
I was meeting buyers this past weekend, and I prepped them beforehand, and when I had met them a couple weeks ago, they said, oh, we haven't signed with anyone. So when they called me, or I think it was email, whichever, to go see this one house, I said, all right, listen, I know you haven't signed anything with anyone, but just so you know, I'm going to meet you there. We are going to go over paperwork prior to going into the house. Are you okay with that? And just to let them know, that was coming first. So as we're going over the paperwork, the right to represent. And I just let them know, look, it was against the law for me to let them in the house without having this signed. And they're like, huh, that's interesting. We've had this other agent show us 10 other houses. So what happens if we go back to one of those houses? And it's like, well, nothing. So that's because she didn't get anything signed. So.
Yeah, and I'll offer you some additional words in that scenario, right? So where I might have gone with that is, well, what could happen depending on the conversations that you had with that other agent, right? Now that we are kind of married in this process for a bit, I behave as your fiduciary, which means we are partners in this process. And one of the fiduciary responsibilities I have for you is the tenet or the concept of confidentiality. And so what could happen is if the other agent that showed you some other houses ends up being the listing agent on a house that you choose to perhaps see and purchase with me as your rep, depending on what you said to that person, there's no responsibility of confidentiality that she has now. And so she may be sharing information about you with the sellers because she actually has a responsibility to those sellers now, not to you. The good news is now that you and I have become partners in this process, anything and everything you say to me is held under the strictest confidence. I actually am forbidden to repeat anything you say to me without getting your written permission. Because now you're so and addition to script, right? But the idea is to help them understand that there's a benefit to them to signing a document with you, right? If they're just running around with whomever will go, my experience has been buyers are not chatty, right? And I will tell you that for me, I have in open house scenarios where I don't represent those folks yet, they're unrepresented or they're kind of willy-nilly with somebody, they'll start talking and I actually hold my hand up and say, oh, folks, you know what? With all due respect, until you and I are actually fiduciary partners, which means you've decided to have me represent you in the purchase of a home, I'm going to ask that you not share that information with me. Simply because in a different scenario, I may have a responsibility to disclose that to somebody else. So don't tell me stuff. I don't want to know. And I'll tell you, every time I've said that to somebody, they lean in and there's curiosity. It doesn't repel them. They're like, really? So can you explain that a little bit more? Because now what they don't say is, we've been mouthing off to, like, we saw 4 other open houses today, and we've been telling people all day long how much we want to spend and what the scenario is, and that we have to be in a house before school starts because my daughter has this special program and right? That's what's going through their head. But I'm the first person who said, oh, you know what? We need to have a sit-down consultation to explain why it's a benefit to you to actually hire a real estate agent and not just kind of go willy-nilly. Not only does it save you time and potentially thousands of dollars, but there's a relationship involved here that really is to your benefit. I'm curious. I'm off this open house at about 3 and I do not have an appointment afterwards. Could you meet me at my office at about 3:20 so that we could conduct that consult and show you exactly what benefit there is to you to hire a real estate agent to help you in your home search? Oui, madame.
I wish that people would get the agents, my fellow agents would get through their head that this is not about getting them tied up to me.
Yeah, right.
It's about me representing them.
Yeah.
And providing them with all the tools that they need. I think if you think of it that way, you would never not do it. You're offering them a valuable service. And especially if you've been in it for a little while, with your knowledge and your expertise and all the tools you have, but it's only for their benefit.
Yeah. Which is why Donna makes a great point in that once you have that mindset, having a conversation about the document, because the reason people get weirded out about the document is because it talks about how we get paid, right? Once you have a mindset of this is for your benefit and we provide a valuable service for which, by the way, I have every expectation to get paid for, or else why would I provide that valuable service? All of that becomes kind of a no-brainer conversation, which again, we will likely not get to this evening, but we will do first thing on Tuesday when we're to that step, right? So I think we've beat that horse good and dead, right? However, it's a really important conversation because too many people are still cheating themselves and their clients out of what becomes a far more productive and deeper relationship by not going through a proper buyer consult, right? Over and above the fact that it's against the law. I mean, yes, there is problematic, to say the least. And yet, the bigger issues in my head are you're robbing yourself and your client out of an opportunity to really understand each other and get the job done the way they need it to be done, right? I loved, just to put a period on the end of this sentence, I love Donna's description of malpractice, right? Because that's a great way to describe it, is malpractice, right? It's like being a doctor, right? I had a tick bite last week, and so I went to urgent care to get some antibiotics just in case it was a bad tick. I don't think it was, but just in case, right? And so that's kind of like both the nurse and the doctor coming in and saying, and not asking me any questions and just saying, well, why are you here? Well, I was hoping for some antibiotics. Well, okay, you know what kind do you want? I don't know, like amoxicillin, maybe doxycycline. Which one do you suggest? Well, you know what? I think either will get the job done. So, right, think about the analogy. Oh, you just want to go see that one house without knowing anything else about you or your ability or whatever? Okay. She wouldn't have asked me if I was allergic to anything. So now she's prescribing amoxicillin. Maybe I'm allergic to amoxicillin. So maybe it's a death sentence, right? I mean, and I know it sounds dramatic. However, it's kind of the same thing, right? I had an expectation that her responsibility was going to be to ask me a bunch of questions and then examine what the issue was, to diagnose what might be the issue, and then ask me some more questions about solving the problem, which she did. She was wonderful, to the extent that after she said, I think you should have 3 weeks of doxycycline, she said, before I prescribe that particular one, do you think in the next 3 weeks you'll be exposed to the sun more than normal? Because doxycycline apparently can make you kind of photosensitive or whatnot. And I said, what I said to her was, look, I'm probably the pastiest white boy you've seen all day. There is no chance I'm going to be out in the sun any more than I have been so far this summer. So to which she laughed and said, okay, great. Well, I just wanted to be certain, because I could have gone a different path if in fact you were going to be like going to Florida and laying in the sun. That's upfront questions, it's diagnosis, it's proper prescription, and then it's additional follow-up questions to make sure that everything was being done for me in the right path, down the right path. All right. Setting the stage. Setting the stage. We'll just get through this one today and then we'll finish for the day. But setting the stage, to get us through it, if it's all right with you, I'm going to go ahead and read that so that we can move through it, and then we'll talk about it. Mr. and Mrs. Beyer, hi, I am Rick Scott. It is a pleasure to meet you. Did you have any trouble finding the office? So listen, before we get started, can I get you some water or something to drink? I am really excited to start this home search process with you today. Now, first, I am going to turn my cell phone off here. There we go, so that we do not have any interruptions. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Beyer, I want to start off by saying to you that today's meeting is really all about you. My job today is to keep us focused, to find out what home will ultimately suit your lifestyle, your needs, your wants, and of course your budget. We'll talk about the home buying process a little bit today. I'll answer any and all of your questions about the next few weeks, and then we'll discuss our expectations and roles in this relationship. How does that sound to you? So there are really 3 possible outcomes to today's meeting. Number 1, you'll understand all of the benefits that I can provide to you in your home search, and you'll hire me as your buyer's agent. Number 2 is, after hearing what I can offer, you may decide that what I bring to the table is not a great fit for you and your family, and you may choose not to hire me. Or 3, it is possible that I may determine that I cannot meet or exceed the expectations that you have set for your home search, and I may choose to turn you down now rather than let you down later. Does that make sense? Great. So if it's all right with you, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk with you a little bit about the home that you are looking for. I'm going to ask you a whole lot of questions in order to develop a really clear understanding of what it is you're seeking in your next home. That way, I don't waste your time by taking you to see properties that just simply don't suit you or your needs. How does that sound? Excellent, let's get started. And then we pivot into the needs analysis. So let's just go back real quick. We have about 10 minutes. I want to just dissect this setting the stage conversation. What did you notice about the setting the stage conversation? What did you hear? What did you like? What did you have questions about? Jonathan, I'll answer that shortly. Jonathan asked, how do you turn them down if you don't like them?
Well, the fact that you're saying that it's about them, you're not going to sit there and talk about you and your years of experience and blah, 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 how big, KW is worldwide, all that presentation.
Yeah, that's spot on, Frank. Because I can tell you, even as Frank was just describing it, I was bored, right? Oh my goodness, the whole idea of, let me tell you all about me and about my accolades and my awards and how people love me and how big Keller Williams is. And oh my goodness me, right? Because here's what's real is that for the most part, people don't care about that, right? Because it's not relevant to them. What is relevant to them is you. You're relevant to them. Their needs are relevant to them, right? Their budget, the things that matter are the things that relate back to them. So great thought. Please note that this script is set up very much the same as the listing side script. There's 3 distinct sections. The first section is kind of the hi, get to know you section, right? Just like we had on the other side. The middle section, that 4th paragraph there, is the agenda, just like we had on the seller side. And then the last piece is the hiring piece, just like we had on the listing side. Right? I love that script. There are 3 possible outcomes to today's meeting. I will tell you, for me personally, when I was doing it, I didn't give it to you because it's not written there. But for me, I used to add in a little, I have always found that humor helps me connect with people, right? And it de-stresses people. Like if now all of a sudden we're talking about hiring, it can feel a little bit heavy, right? So my version of this was, 1, you'll understand all the benefits I can provide to you in your home search, and you'll hire me as your buyer's agent, which would be awesome. Number 2 is, after hearing what I can offer, you may decide that what I bring to the table is not a great fit for you and your family, and you may choose not to hire me, which frankly, might make me a little sad. However, there is that 3rd option, where it is possible I may determine that I cannot meet or exceed your expectations, which doesn't happen terribly often. And yet, if it were to occur today, I would rather let you down now rather than disappoint you later. Sorry, I screwed that up. I would rather turn you down now rather than let you down later. Right? So that was my version of it. I just kind of added those little things in to just try and lighten it a little bit, right? It also kind of pointed in a direction of, you may hire me, yay, or you may not, oh, boo, right? And just kind of give people the ups and the downs around, I would love for you to hire me today. You seem like great people. I know I can help you. Let's have a conversation around what it is you need. And the answer to Jonathan's question about how do you kind of wiggle away from someone who at some point you just decide, yikes, I just don't think this is for me. Well, if you'll use this script and set these expectations, in that choice number 3 says, if I find I can't meet or exceed your expectations, I'd rather turn you down now rather than let you down later, right? At the end of the consult, P.S., you still owe somebody a consult, right? So you don't get to decide right now at the beginning of the consult, I don't like you, and say, oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I double booked and I forgot. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, right? Because that's just, there's a level of professionalism that has to be maintained here. However, if you get through the consult and you're still not wowed and for whatever reason you don't want to proceed, well, you've given yourself that out by utilizing this set the stage script. You've given yourself the out of, Jonathan, I if you remember in the very beginning, we had a conversation around the 3 possible outcomes today. And I fear that I may not be the best match for you in terms of a real estate agent that can meet or exceed your needs. Based on some of the things that you said you were expecting, it sounds to me like this may not be the best match, which is okay. I mean, I don't take that personally, and I certainly hope that you don't take that personally. I would rather say to you today that I'm not sure this is going to be the best match for us, and allow you to go and find someone who can meet those expectations. Maybe it's somebody who says things like, well, I expect you to answer your phone by the third ring when I call, and I expect you to be available 24/7. And if I want to go and see a property on Christmas morning, you'll leave your family on Christmas morning. Now, I can tell you that none of those things have ever actually been said out loud. There have been people in my career that I feel like have that expectation, but see, I don't blame them for that. I put that back on myself because I wasn't clear about how I run my business. So I just got clearer up front about what they can expect from me in terms of return phone calls and in terms of my business hours and in terms of how we would work together. So the clearer you are up front, the fewer issues you have on the tail end. Does that make sense to you, that 3 outcomes script? What questions do you have around it? Anything? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Will you use it?
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just thinking with all the it might be minor, but all the terminology that you use with consulting and all of that, is hiring, like, is that, like, I guess hiring in some ways gives me, maybe it's just me, the kind of, maybe would you use partnering better, or I guess they are hiring you, obviously, but it does create a different, to me, if I hire someone, like you said, oh, I expect you to be blah, 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 it's almost like, I don't know, it's just the terminology of them hiring you.
Well, so let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you hire an attorney,
That's true, yeah.
do you set the schedule? Do you tell the attorney that, you know what, I expect you to come to my house when I want you?
Yeah, no, I guess, I don't know, hiring, it's funny because I always think of that as like an employee scenario. And I guess maybe they are, but I just never thought of it as, I guess it's the same as signing it, you're hiring them.
Yeah, frankly, I wouldn't, that's one of the words that I absolutely would not change.
Okay,
I would, because these are both on the list side and on the buy side, these are hiring conversations, and you want to make sure that they really
so
understand.
you're hiring them, and then you're hiring them to consult, basically. Is that more in line?
Well, yes, they're hiring you
Yes, I meant
for
that.
representation services, right? They're hiring you for representation services,
Mhm.
and my representation services show up like this. So when you hire me, this is what you get.
Got
Right.
you.
Right? You hire, when you go to a doctor, you hire that doctor. You hire a surgeon to do certain work, right? So I think it's I would broaden the perspective about what hiring actually looks like.
Okay.
Rather than change that, because it does send, the word is there for a reason, and it sends the message that this is a serious
Contrast.
choice
Mhm.
you are making. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. And then, of course, towards the very bottom, we have some of those permission-based transition statements where we're going to leave the setting the stage conversation and then go to the needs analysis. We will start with the needs analysis on Tuesday, but let me leave you with this thought. For anyone who kind of heard that setting the stage and said, you know what, it seems a little heavy-handed, or it seems a little much, I think, here's what I can tell you. People who struggle with a conversation around the buyer agreement, almost always, if I could go get in my little hot tub time machine and go back in time, didn't at the consultation set the expectations about hiring clearly. Almost every single time. Because if you don't set the expectations about, look, at some point in this conversation, we're going to pivot and have a hiring conversation. If you don't do that up front, and then you do it anyway by hauling out your document, even if you say, look, the state requires this, well, it feels like an ambush to them because you didn't tell them up front that that was the conversation we were going to have. So trust me when I tell you the real importance of this setting the stage script is to clearly set the expectations about what it is we're about to do, and that this conversation ends in a big question mark about whether or not we're going to move forward. Right? It's a hiring conversation. If you will set that expectation clearly up front, you will almost never have an issue with the actual hiring conversation. It's just when you leave that out up front, it feels like you're ambushing them up on the tail end, right? Because you're all about, yay, houses, 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 houses. And like you're dangling all these things in front of them. And then you say, okay, but you can't have any of that until you sign this. Right? Now that's not physically or verbally exactly what you're doing, but you get my point, right? Oftentimes that's the conversation. All we do is have conversation about pretty houses. And then we say, but you can't have any of that unless you sign here. And we think that by hauling out the fact that it's a state law, that helps them feel less ambushed. It does not. As a matter of fact, sometimes that even makes them feel more ambushed, because now it feels like you have them in a no-win situation. They weren't expecting it. They don't really want to do it. And now you're telling them that the law says they must do it, right? And they're like, this all feels ooky, right? You know that word ooky? Well, if you don't, you do now, right? It makes them feel ooky. That's just, and now we've tarnished that reputation again that Carolyn was talking about earlier, right? And we didn't mean to do it. Right, which is why I so wholeheartedly encourage you to work with these scripts and have these sit-down conversations. So here's the last thing I'm going to leave you with. Write this down because it doesn't appear anywhere else. You may have written it down earlier in our time together, but I don't remember. Conflict only arises from unmet expectations. Conflict only arises from unmet expectations. Therefore, if you spend your time with your clients and clients to be almost overdoing it with expectations, which I'm not sure there really is a version of over communicating expectations, right? If you spend that time up front, you'll hardly ever have issues on the tail end. Whether that's the consult itself or the relationship or showing property or selling the house, the whole experience, right? So be clear up front so everyone knows what they're getting into going in. You don't have issues on the back end. The wishy-washier you are up front, the more issues you have on the back. All right, guys, I hope that's helpful. We will, by hook or by crook, we will figure out a way to finish on Tuesday. So we'll see you at 4 o'clock. We'll finish the scripts. We'll go through the buyer consult. We'll go through the anatomy of buyer consult, and we will, by golly, have time for that cat house story. We'll figure out a way to make it work. Have a lovely evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning, and have a great weekend if I don't see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.